These are pieces that have been impactful over my lifetime and have either opened up my love for music or allowed me to process some deep emotions. So I will share a brief description of the pieces and why they're meaningful throughout the program. Thank you again, and I hope that you enjoy tonight's recital. Thank you. Okay, so I forgot to mention before I played that one, I grew up as a pastor's kid. My dad is the pastor, has been the pastor at the same church since I was 6 years old. He's 76 as of last week, and still pastoring the same church. I learned dedication and grit from him. But I started playing for church when I was 10. It's not that I was good. It was that we didn't have anybody else. I remember I loved to go into church with my dad during the week, and I would sit in the office, in the secretary's office while he was in his office working or studying. And our pianist came in and had a meeting with him, and she left, and he said, well, we'll miss you, and just kind of looked at him. I was about 9, 10 years old, and he looked at me, and he said, you ready? I said, for what? And he said, you're going to be our new pianist. I said, okay. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no clue what I was supposed to do, but I just started playing, and everything was really fast and in the key of C. And our church people were so generous and so kind and just went along with it and were very, very encouraging through the years. Well, because I was now the church pianist, I needed to play an offertory every Sunday, and our church was very small. So this didn't need to be anything long, but I did not know that people actually arranged and published hymns, like books. I was 10 years old. What did I know about this? And so I thought that all church pianists just made up their own stuff. So I started making up my own stuff. And then when I was about 15, we went to Ellis Piano in Birmingham, and I discovered rows and rows and rows of books of hymn arrangements. And the arrangement that I just played of Majesty was in a book, the very first hymn arrangement book that I ever got, that my dad bought me. It's arranged by Bruce Greer, and I've kind of added my own twist to it. But then when I discovered that was a thing, you could do this, I said, oh, this is a new goal for me. This is what I want to do one day. One day, I'm going to publish a book of hymn arrangements along with recordings of how I want them played, because I'm very specific about that. Fast forward several years, a couple of decades, and I now have, well, let's back up, because it's been about 10 years or so since this was first accomplished, but I found out about a new publisher out in California who was accepting, she had several composers working under her, publishing music, but she wanted sacred music. So I reached out to her, sent her some of my stuff, and she hired me. And I now have 2 books of hymn arrangements published. And praise God for that. That is something that I never thought. And along with that, she liked for the composers to record arrangements of their pieces so people could hear how they wanted them to sound. Like if that was not sent from God. So the next piece is my arrangement of Praise to the Lord. And I've dedicated this to Kathy Lamb, who was my very first ever piano teacher. She is the one who instilled in me a love for music. She had this way of bringing it to life, and just, she could explain it in a way that was just so beautiful. And because of her, I have sworn that I will forever teach beginners, no matter how accomplished I may get, because that first piano teacher makes such a difference in their lives. So this is dedication to Mrs. Kathy Lamb. I promise I'm not going to talk after every piece. Okay, so the next piece is the piece that made me discover my love of Beethoven and classical music. I was 15 when I started this piece and had all of the teenage angst that most 15-year-old girls have, and this allowed me to express myself. But this was where I really learned how to use music in a positive way. And so this is the first movement of Beethoven's Pathetique. If you know anything about Beethoven, you probably know that he went deaf as an adult. This was written before he went deaf, but he wrote something called the Heiligenstadt Testament. And in that, he said he could tell he was going deaf, and this was basically a letter written to his brothers that later everybody read. And he said that he could tell he was losing his hearing. He wasn't sure how he would continue. He thought about taking his own life. But in the end, music compelled him, his art compelled him to continue living and to continue creating. So, as an angsty 15-year-old girl, I found that poetic. Now I completely understand from a different perspective where he was coming from. But this is the first movement of Beethoven's Pathetique. I love all of the feedback from Susanna. That's so sweet. Okay, so now this brings us into the development. My development part of my life was quite a wild ride. As I said, I grew up in a pastor's home. I had done everything I was supposed to do. I'd gone to Bible college. I married a preacher. We were having a family. And then my preacher husband decided he didn't want to be married anymore, and he didn't want to be in the ministry anymore. And we had 3 children, and he left. Sent me into a tailspin of sorts. I moved back home, was able to live with my parents for a while. They helped out tremendously. About 3 years later, about the time that I'm starting to feel like I'm settled, we're going to be okay, we're going to make it. My son, who was 4 at the time, he was the baby, I have 2 girls and then my son. We did not know he was born with a polycystic astrocytoma in the core of his brain. And in his sleep, 4 months after he turned 4, he passed away. And again, that sent me reeling. So during the decade of my 20s, I had gotten married, had a miscarriage, had 3 children, gotten divorced. And the marriage was very toxic. He'd become very abusive. And so it was a blessing from God when it ended, and then buried a child. How in the world was I supposed to continue? Only through God's strength. And this is where just everything comes full circle. Everything is connected in our lives. We can look back when we get to, after a traumatic event or after something that's life-changing, we can look back and see how God was preparing us all along. And as I've healed and grown, I've been able to see how God was preparing me, even from childhood. And he used my love of hymns and music to heal my soul, along with a lot of therapy. Quality Christian therapists are just a game changer. So the next couple of hymn arrangements that I'm going to share with you are from my second, or actually from both books. The first one is from the second book, and then it as well is from my first book of hymn arrangements. But these are 2 hymns that God used during that time of brokenness and consequential healing to just bring me closer to him and to remind me that all things do work together. So as I mentioned before, I had gotten married while I was in college, but I dropped out, so I had not finished college. Then after Austin passed away, I realized life is so short and so unpredictable and so uncertain. There's never a good time. As a child, I used to dream about getting a doctorate in piano. Like, how amazing would that be? It was this far off dream that I didn't know how it was going to happen. But then I decided after Austin passed away, that was kind of my wake up call to go after what I wanted to do. And so I went back to school. I was a single mom with 2 middle schoolers, which y'all know that's just such a fun age as a parent. But my girls were just amazing. We had become very, very close through what we had been through. And they were so supportive. And on the days that I felt like I was not going to make it, like I just needed to quit and walk away, they were there cheering me on. There was something I was going to say, but I'll come back to that later. It took 6 years to finish that bachelor's degree, but I did it. I was by far the oldest person in my class. That's okay. Most of my classes were actually online. This was when online school first started, but it was called distance learning. And so my music theory teacher, she was in her 80s at the time, and this was back early 2000s, and she had never even touched a computer. So she would send me assignments by snail mail, and we would talk on the phone at 9 o'clock every night and do music theory at 9 o'clock every night. I mean, just so much fun. But I did it. I graduated. Took 6 years, but the time's going to pass anyway. Might as well be working towards something, right? So this next piece, it was introduced to me. This is the 3rd movement of Bach's Italian Concerto. I love the entire piece, but it's very long, so I won't play it for you today. But this piece was introduced to me by my undergraduate teacher, who has become such a great friend, and we still stay in touch. And he helped me through my doctorate as well. He kind of talked me off the ledge a couple of times. So I am very grateful for Dr. Jonathan Brown, but this piece is dedicated to him. And now we are in the recapitulation. This next piece kind of overlaps between development and recapitulation, and I've dedicated this one to my daughters. This is part of a 3-piece series that I wrote in 2020, was published in early 2021, was based on my words of the year. So my words that year for 2020, of course, not knowing what was coming, was fearless, powerful, and determined. And I chose those words because they embodied aspects of my daughters that inspired me. So this one is dedicated to my daughters who are now moms. And that's just so beautiful. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. But this is determined. I believe it's verse 25. It says, "Restore the years the locusts have eaten." And right after my husband left, I started praying that verse over my family, that one day God would restore all of these years that I had envisioned as being one way and that it had actually ended up another. Well, that's just life, isn't it? And then it just occurred to me this past Thanksgiving when I was together with both of my girls and all of their families, that prayer had been answered. So now my daughters are in their 20s. And ironically, I think that this is just another little blessing from God that they have all boys. And each of their boys, so now I've got 3 grandsons, and each of their boys just has some aspect of Austin's personality. The middle one, though, my oldest daughter's son is 2, and he looks like Austin, just like him. And he does a lot of the same little things that Austin used to do. And so it's so precious to see that. But each of the boys has some aspect of Austin's personality, and it's just precious. So the next piece is Dee Dee's Lullaby. Dee Dee is my grandma name. And there's a story behind that. But my oldest grandson was born in 2021. My son-in-law was stationed, he was in the Navy and was stationed in San Diego, and he was being deployed the summer that their son was due. And he tried to push off the deployment. They worked with him as much as they could, but about 3 weeks or so before their son was born, he had to be deployed. And so I got to spend the summer with him in San Diego. I got to be at his birth, which was just the most beautiful thing. And this is the piece that I wrote for him. I was telling patients at lunch today, my daughters are vastly different. My oldest daughter is just like me. My youngest daughter is a hippie. And I say that in the kindest way. She's just very crunchy, I'll just say that. And but her boys are named Grizzly and Coyote. And I love it, like the names fit them. It's just precious. But when Grizzly was born, this was the piece that I would play to get him to sleep. So this is Dee Dee's Lullaby. Okay, so I'm going to end with one of my all-time favorite, I don't know if it's considered a hymn, but My Tribute by Andre Crouch. How can I say thanks for the things you have done for me? I feel like this song just captures my life so beautifully. God has done so much for me. I was talking to my mom last night, and And I said, it occurred to me that Cassia, my oldest daughter, in May will be the same age that I was when Austin died. And I said, I was so young. I didn't feel that young, but I was so young. And she said, you've been through a lot. You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't. God has saved me from cancer twice. He has spared my life multiple times. He has brought my family through things that I'm still remembering because I had blocked a lot of it out. But I am still here because there is a purpose. There is a higher calling on my life. And I know that every step of the way has been just divine guidance. So this is the closing song and my prayer. How can I say thanks?